We want to send out some prayers to Kim Jeans and her family. They had a little bit of a family emergency this morning, so she won't be here, but we want to send our prayers to her family, please. Today's topic, we're calling it end of month nightmares. Why? Because they happen. So I'll start the conversation with, you have a closing today, and you did your walkthrough yesterday, and you found that the HVAC was leaking. Now what? You represent the buyer. Let's start some conversation around that. Anyone? And there's no wrong answers. We're here to learn, safe space. Hey, Christine.
I can
What do you
say
think?
something to that. So what I would do, I would definitely send like an HVAC person out there as soon as possible, have them do an estimate, and then put the money for the repairs in escrow, put it in an amendment that survives closing, and yeah, and then close, and the repairs will be done after closing.
Okay, I love your answer. So let me throw a curveball if you'll role play with me.
Okay.
When we walked through, not only was the HVAC leaking, but the foyer ceiling was wet and it was dripping on the hardwood floors. We closed today at 1. Now what?
Good question. Well, or you can postpone you can just ask for an extension and say, look, this is something totally unexpected. Nobody knew about it. We need more time to discuss it and look into it and write an extension for 3 days.
Yeah, or whatever it's going to take to get that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I bring that up because that's a real live thing that I've dealt with this morning. So I wanted to throw it out there for the broker chat, because we're at the end of the month, and what happens at the end of the month? Typically closings, lots of closings. And usually for us as brokers, this is probably when we get the most calls. Would you guys not agree? You're on your way to closing, you're sitting in the closing, you left closing, there was a fist fight in the parking lot. I don't know what goes on, but those are the kind of calls we get. And a fist fight in the parking lot is an unusual broker call to get, but you do get those kind. I would say call 911 and try to get everybody to go to their respective sides. So thank you, Christine. That's a great answer. So in my broker opinion, first of all, if you go on, we'll just use this scenario, you go on Sunday evening, you find the leak, and you're right. If it's something minor, you probably could get some money put in escrow. You can get an emergency plumber, HVAC, whatever it takes to get out there. That's hard when it falls on a weekend and you've got an early morning closing or closing Monday, period. So the best thing to do is to find out what all the parties want. I find that sometimes agents start making decisions for the buyer and the seller when you really need to talk to the buyer and seller. And of course, they're going to say to you as the agent, well, what do you think? And you need to be ready with those answers. And Christine gave a very good example. Can we get it fixed by 5 o'clock today and just push the closing back if it's earlier? Or can we just postpone the closing based on the estimate and the time to fix and the buyer to be able to come back and take a look? It's not what an agent wants to hear because you want to close, but it's not about us. It's about our clients and our customers and making sure that they're satisfied. Otherwise, you're going to get that call to say, well, we closed and it's still leaking. And then what happens when those calls continue for you as agents? You reach into your, I just got my commission pocket, and you end up paying for it in some fashion. And we don't want that for you. So thank you so much, Christine, for that. That was a great answer. Anyone else have any interesting things that have happened to them at the end of the month? Anyone? Carlton, Tom?
Well, I'll just piggyback off what you have just described. And, sometimes it's not possible to move that closing back because, you may have a buyer who's been living in a suitcase for, a week because they've already sold their house, or, whatever the circumstances are, and they need to close. And so, you're just going to have to work with the other party and come up with a good solution, so that those folks can get in that house, even though there are repairs that need to happen. They can happen after closing. We just need to get it in writing, and the seller should be willing to escrow some funds for that as well.
Exactly. That's also a real scenario. People are living in temporary housing, or they're living with friends or family, and that's just not an option. So you've got to be able to know, you don't want to wait until this scenario happens to you, which I applaud all of you that are on this call today, learning things from this broker chat that you've got in your arsenal when those type of scenarios arise. Carlton, did you have anything to add to that? Thank you for being on the call today.
Yeah, no problem. One thing, it strikes me that it's a really great reason to make sure you're doing walkthroughs, right, with your clients, because you never know what material difference could be looming out there prior to closing. And yeah, just kind of working with the buyer and the seller to figure out a solution that works for all. These things happen, and it could be through no fault of anybody's, and just making sure that we're all working together to get the best outcome, I would say. I kind of like, if you can, and I know it's not always possible, but I would prefer pushing closing back and getting the issue resolved if at all possible. But like Tom said, sometimes buyers have to get in there. And so you just figure out how to do it and make it work.
Yeah, the other thing too is letting the seller, whoever the party is that needs to remedy this, let the seller know that the contract indicates that house has to be in the same condition that buyer, purchased at the offer price, at the offer date. So at the end of the day, if someone goes in and they take a gouge out of the wall or whatever, you need to set that expectation to the seller. I know you think you've sold the home, but you haven't sold it until the teller says, "Welcome back, seller." Not at the closing table, because anything can happen at the closing table. So make sure that you're educating your seller that this house has to be, I'm constantly telling my seller, that needs to be done. That needs to be cleared out of here. Otherwise, the buyer can charge you for cleaning out, these leftover things you left in the garage and things like that. You have to have those hard conversations with sellers. And also when it comes to the buyer having problems at closing, what issues has anybody had about buyers? We're supposed to close today, your package isn't there. Now what? What happens then? So what other things, let's open the discussion up. What other things have you guys had happen to you at the end of the month? Or you may feel like you have something looming for the end of this month for your closings. Open mic.
If it's okay. Yeah.
Hey, Joel.
How you guys doing? It's interesting that you're talking about this particular topic, because I got a feeling at the end of the month on Friday, the 30th, we have a client who's moving into a new construction, and they didn't have power on. They just got power. She just texted me, we got power on today. And when we went out there about a week ago, last week, it was quite a bit of stuff that needs to be done. The unfortunate part is the buyer, the lender does not want to go past the 30th. He does not want to pull their credit again, does not want to have to extend it in any kind of way. So I just want to make sure we still are protecting the seller, the buyer, because I got a feeling on Friday, everything is not going to be quite, it may be good enough for them to move in, but there may be a few things that need to be done. I just kind of want to make sure that we don't miss the opportunity to make sure that the seller, like I heard Tom say something about maybe put something in escrow, something, just want to make sure that we're doing the best we can to protect the buyer.
Generally with new construction, you're going to do a walkthrough prior to closing with that builder, and they're going to take notes. It's very, very common in new construction. Most I'd say almost 100% of the time, where the builder has to come back after closing on punch out items. And it's just important. That's very important to do with your walkthrough. And then also remind your buyer that, and again, this is generally with most builders, that they come back within a year and also do another round of punch out. You know, for example, like caulking that's separated, or, you know, maybe the hardwood floor has a buckle in it or something like that, that just happens because it's brand new construction. And, you know, when you build a home and it's 98 degrees outside, it's gonna it's gonna affect that home when it starts to get freezing outside. So it's almost like a breathable organ in that regard. And so that's something that I believe that you need to set the expectation with your buyer when you are selling new construction, that those are just common things that have to be dealt with new construction. But very important to do that initial walkthrough and make sure that builder is there, and make sure that they're taking good copious notes of things that have to happen after closing.
And also, if you had an inspection, if you had an independent inspection, make sure that inspection report reaches the builder's, you know, general contractor, whoever's doing the walkthrough, so that they have everything your buyer, you know, had issue with, not just the walkthrough, but they did their own independent inspection. And it could be that some of those items are already fixed by the time they come back, but you save a lot of time getting the buyer's opinion, the builder's opinion, that walkthrough where everything is blue taped and taken care of. But the beauty of new construction, if I could say it that way, is that they will come back, because they usually are giving you some type of 1-year warranty or 210 type warranty, where they're coming back, as Tom said, to do nail pop fixes and things of that nature. And then as a good agent, you want to follow up with that buyer and just say, how are things going? Has the builder been back? What's going on? And then you can just make a little gentle nudge to the agent on site to say, hey, just checking to see if the builder, you know, was able to come back and take care of those things.
I have a question to that. When you say the builder can come back and fix whatever popping nails or whatever, so it's up to the buyer to reach out to them if something comes up, or would they come back routinely after 6 months and check everything, or how is the process here? And can the buyer request that a few times every time he finds something, or is that a one-time thing?
Most builders are only going to want to come one time, and that's at the end of the first year.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if it's something significant, let's just say there is a nail pop in the roof that's causing a leak, they're going to want to come back and take care of that ASAP. But they're not going to want to be running over there every time something happens. They're going to want to wait until the end of that first year.
Okay.
That's been my experience with most builders.
Thank you.
Mine as well. And Christine, you know what a lovely closing gift would be, you know, on top of whatever you give to your clients? Give them like a journal, a home journal, where they can put all their warranty, their closing documents, and then a little a sheet in there, and tell them at closing, every time you see something that needs to be fixed, write it down.
Yeah.
Because 6 months is a long time, or a year. Every builder is different. Some come back in 6 months, some come back in a year. But if they have a list, then they don't forget, and that year is over, they're not coming back and they go, oh, I forgot to tell them about XYZ. Make them write it down so they can just hand that list to that person, and
That's
that could
great.
solve a lot of problems.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else want to add to that? New build is a different animal than our regular resale. We're almost at the mercy of their contracts, their process, you know, what they will and will not do. And that's an expectation that should be set with the buyer when they're buying new construction, because we all think in resale mind for the most part. And then when we work with new construction, it's like a brain interrupt. Like, that's not how we normally do it, but okay. So I think good communication to say, Now, this is going to be a little different than how we handle things in resale. And this is what the buyer is saying. And every new construction contract is different. So when we talk today, we're talking general, because you might have let's say it's not a new construction builder. What if it's let me throw this at you. What if it's an investor who rehabbed the home? Now what? Silence.
Well, I can say this. It just made me realize too, because this situation I think is what I'm going to go through is a little bit different than just the regular, some of the things you missed. Because I mean, there was a lot of stuff they needed to do, but and I know it's a few things they probably won't be able to do. So I'm going to see if I can get them to at least agree to come back within 30 days to take care of, because it's going to be, what I'm saying, but just talking to you guys helped me to just make sure we put that in place with the builder, that they agree that 30 days, they'll let them accumulate the things that they need to, that they have found so that they can address it. And then also do the 11th month. So, but that helps a lot. But the question you just asked, I'm gonna let somebody else deal with that.
Come on, Joel, go for it, go for it. Well, I work with a lot of investors. I think one of the things that the investors I work with, I always make sure we have some type of warranty in place. When you're doing your inspection with especially rehab, I think Carlton talked about this on one of her broker sessions about, checking for permits and things of that nature. If that's done during your inspection, then you're able to come back to that investor to say, since this wasn't done with a permit, what's our guarantees for X, Y, and Z? Because we all know a lot of times these investors, they're just in it to get in and get out and sell it. And the buyer is left holding the bag if something pops up. So there are a lot of really good warranties out there, 210 and all of that. I would have an arsenal of warranties that you can look at to see the best ones that will handle the most, first of all, because we all know our home warranties have what? Fine print, also known as exclusions. So don't just sell a warranty to your buyer thinking, oh, it'll cover the roof. No, it won't. It might cover patching or repair, but it's not going to replace it. So you want to find those good warranties. And we always have our warranty companies come to our team meetings to tell us about the coverage. So you want to ask deeper questions when you're working with a situation where it might be a rehab and you want to make sure you negotiate that type of thing. Or will that rehab investor be coming back in 6 months, a year, whatever the case may be? Anyone had any experience, good, bad, or ugly with that? Just me? The other thing too, if it's something major, again, just like Christine said, that's another good example of putting something in escrow. That investor really wants to get in and get out, so they don't want to put any money in escrow. They rather, make your customer or client happy and fix whatever the situation is. But I definitely would encourage all of you, if you are dealing with something that's a rehab, that there's some type of warranty in place, whether it's from that investor or both. And especially if they take it all the way to the slab, that's essentially called an effective built home, because the slab might be 1965, but the house is 2021. Okay, so 210 has other divisions, and I'm not just saying 210, there's others out there, but they have the most diverse departments because builders use 210 for the new construction. I would talk to your home warranty vendors in your office to ask, what are the best, how do you handle rehab type homes? That would be a question. That way you've got that in your tool belt as soon as that scenario opens up and say, you can tell your buyer, I've got the right warranty that will probably cover this type of house. Questions on that? All right, what other mishaps can happen at the end of the month. We know they happen.
I've got a good one. So you go and do your walkthrough and the seller has moved out and there are holes in the wall from the TVs and from some artwork. What do we do? This just happened last week. And the buyer's agent, we had the listing and the buyer's agent was very, very angry and said, no, it's usual and customary for you to fill in those holes and touch up the paint. Well, guess what, guys? That's not accurate. I have dealt with people, sellers, who are very meticulous and will do that, but that's not a given. So if you have a buyer, and that's something that I think you all should all think about when you are writing your contracts, is that you need to ask the in the contract to have any holes patched and repainted. But here's the other caveat. Let's just say the house was painted 10 years ago and they're going in and you're going to patch up some holes from some artwork, but mainly from the TV, the insulation of the TVs on the wall. It's very hard to touch that paint up. It doesn't look good. The whole wall really has to be painted. So that's just something that I think everybody should be aware of. It's an issue I dealt with last week. And I just wanted to get some discussion on that piece of it.
And we have special steps. If you look at your special steps index in GAR, you have special steps for those type of repair comments. You don't have to, we're not attorneys. We don't need to recreate the will and write something that might not be solid. So you've got those kind of special steps to help you to say, this will survive the closing, and or this is what we want to happen. You're walking through, as you represent the buyer and you're walking through the house, you see pictures on the wall. You see TVs mounted to the wall now. Most people have their TVs mounted to the wall. Unless they're leaving that TV, there's going to be some substantial damage when they take all of that hardware down. And if you're the listing agent, you went to the listing appointment. When you're walking through, those should be questions. Are you taking the curtain rods? Are you taking that big mirror in the dining room down? You will need to patch that and fix that. These are, you see how we can eliminate some of that end of month surprise when you are doing this from the very beginning as a listing agent and as the buyer walking through that home. It's not a matter of, are you taking the refrigerator and so on and so forth. Look at those walls and see what looks like what might be really difficult to take down and repair. And it could just be, if you don't catch it when you are writing the contract, then definitely it should be added during due diligence.
Yeah. The other part of that too, when you're looking, is ask them, are you planning to take that chandelier? Because if you are planning to take that chandelier, let's just go ahead and switch it out now, so that that's not something that becomes a point of contention between the buyer and the seller.
One thing too, when you're representing your sellers, and the seller says, okay, yeah, I'm going to patch the walls and I'll paint, just protect them by saying we're going to match it as closely as possible. Like, you guys were saying it's impossible to match paint after a certain number of years. So I've had it where buyers come in and they're really upset and want the whole wall painted because now that sticks out like a sore thumb.
Yeah.
So just make sure when you're representing your sellers, you're protecting them in that manner too.
I always tell us when I go in for a listing appointment, I tell the seller, if you're going to take something down or remove any art and then you plan on, you can't spot paint. I tell them, you have to paint from seam to seam. So you got to, and I show it to them from one corner to the other corner. You have to paint this whole wall. You can't. That's why sometimes they say, well, I want to take the TV mounts. I say, do you really want to take them or do you want to leave them up there? So And so after explaining it to them, sometimes they'll say, well, I'll just leave them. And then sometimes they say, well, I'll go ahead and I'll restore the wall. Because I just think it's easier at the end. Nobody wants a transaction to go south. So we try to, address it right from the beginning so that they know exactly what they're expected to do. And I just think, you should give the house to somebody in a pretty decent manner.
I saw it one time where they left just a TV mount. Is that something you think is okay? Or I'm not sure if all TVs would fit that same TV mount then.
That's true. So all TVs don't fit the mount. So it's, when I move, I like to just leave with my suitcase. You can have it all. Guess what? If I'm getting my price, you can buy that stuff again. I mean, you're dragging a 1978 washer and dryer to your brand new house. Okay, leave it if the buyer wants it. But when it comes to these mounts and things like that, TVs are so inexpensive now. Leave it. That's my opinion. I can't say to a seller to leave it because maybe grandma gave it to them and it has sentimental value. But at the end of the day, it's so much easier to just leave with my shoes and suitcase and move on to the new house.
You can leave your.
I agree.
Deborah, you can
Yeah,
leave.
don't sweat the small stuff, right?
Right. But I wanted to say there's a lot of bizarre stuff going on now because I had a couple of calls coming over the weekend, Deborah. They probably should have come to you regarding a downline. One is on vacation and the other is going to her closing. And the people did not want to move their piano and some other big items. And my advice was don't close because that expense should not be on the person who's buying the house to get those items out of that house until we can get in touch with the listing agent. And those are huge items. It's a huge piano involved in this transaction. So we're trying to settle that now. Hopefully we can get that settled. But people are just doing some bizarre things right now. Why would the seller not want to move their piano out of the home?
Have you already closed?
No, they're not closing until we get this thing situated.
Okay.
They're working on that now. No.
So let me switch that a little bit because this is a real scenario also. A stager staged a home and they were told on numerous occasions to get their items out. And they, for whatever reason, did not. Like you said, there are odd things going on right now in this particular market. And the buyer and seller closed. What happens to the stager's furniture?
Interesting.
I believe it belongs to the buyer then after closing.
Ding, 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 ding. That would be correct.
That's a correct answer.
I remember slightly from learning real estate.
Sounds good to me. That sounds like a great answer.
I'm surprised by the numerous times I asked that agent to keep going back and saying, you need to get your furniture, you need to get your furniture, you need to get your furniture. And they did not. I guess there could be a legal thing that the stager could go back and do something about trying to get it. But I've just never heard of a stager not promptly getting their furniture out of a home once the home is ready to go to closing. And in this particular case, they, for whatever reason, did not. And it was very nicely staged. So kudos to the buyer.
Yeah. Interesting.
What else? End of month chaos. That's all.
The other thing that I've dealt with time and time and time again is that the buyer did not look under the Oriental rugs to see the condition of the floors. And then the seller has moved, they've moved their beautiful Oriental rug and the floors are all messed up. So I've dealt with that a lot over my career. And, it's a tough one because it may be very difficult to move furniture around in order to try and take a look at those floors. But I think you should at least try.
So let me throw it out there, Tom's example. What should you do to protect your client? Or how do you explain to the seller when you're going to the listing appointment? Anyone had any experience with that and how they handle it?
When they do your inspection, lift up those lift up all those rugs when you're doing your inspection or your final walkthrough, make sure you lift up those rugs.
What if it's too heavy? A piano, a couch? You can't look behind the couch because it's heavy. How do you handle that?
I guess you could probably get something written if there's any damage, that they will come back, an amendment to the contract. If there's any damage, once they move everything out, that they'll be responsible for it.
Amendment is
Wouldn't
good,
they need,
but when you're looking at the house, you can obviously see, as Tom gave the
Oh, if you see
description.
it, yeah, if you see
I
it,
would write it in the contract
write
immediately.
in the contract. Yeah, if you see it, then write it in the contract. Exactly.
It might also be a good idea sometime in certain cases, maybe just like with the chandeliers, if you're not going to take that chandelier, let's go ahead and switch it out. Maybe the rugs should be rolled up and the floors be exposed. I don't know. I mean, I just think that it has become an issue so many times, I don't even care to admit how many times I've had to deal with that. But somehow, as a listing agent, you're going to have that discussion with your seller, and as a buyer's agent, perhaps write it into your contract that the seller warrants that the floors are, not messed up.
Yeah, almost always, and it's going to be a decoloration in the floor when you remove those rugs.
Yeah,
There's gonna be something going on, almost always.
yeah, I agree.
Willie, you had a question. Go ahead and unmute and ask your question out loud.
hey, good afternoon. I was just asking, like, damage that they would know of, that would need to be in the seller's disclosure as well.
You're correct, but they might not realize that, if those, let's use Tom's example again, the rugs have been down for, say, 10 years, and maybe there was a scratch that they said, oh, I'll take care of that later, found this beautiful rug and put it over it and completely forgot about that scratch until it's time to sell. So
Maybe they didn't realize that their little poodle that piddled on the rug continuously and created
and
a
discolored it.
spot on the floors.
Yeah. So sometimes these are just things, we all live in our dwellings, and it's like, oh, we'll get to that, and then you sell and forget all about it until someone has an inspection, and then you realize, oh yeah, I knew about that, I'll take care of it, or no, I'm not taking care of it, you bought it as is, that kind of thing. So yeah, the seller's disclosure, Willie, is excellent. You use that during your inspection to check everything, but what our experience has been are the things that are not on the disclosure that the seller doesn't really think about, because all the seller's doing with that disclosure is answering questions. They're not thinking about the other things that are wrong with their house.
Right. Because I had one up in Alpharetta from watering the plant. It was leaking and the floor was damaged, and they didn't really know that it was damaged from watering that plant. And was running under the rug. And they honestly said they didn't know that it was damaged. It was repaired, but they didn't realize it was being damaged from the plant.
I had a similar situation one time. It was in a garage, and there were a bunch of personal items stacked against the wall. And when we did the final walkthrough, the house was completely emptied out, but those items in the garage were still there. So we couldn't look behind it. And then we closed. She had moved everything out, and then I checked back in with my buyer, and he explained to me, oh, after she got everything out, there was mold, and he had to replace sheetrocks. So she was, deliberately hiding things apparently. And like from the buyer side, nor the inspector nor me, I didn't even think about it like that. And then it didn't show up. And he just told me about it, and luckily he was kind enough, to take care of it himself. but I would not have known what to do as a buyer. Can you can sue the seller then, or what do you do in a case like that? And I'm sure he wouldn't like to, go through all of that officially suing somebody, but it wasn't a good experience for my buyer.
Well, always know that anyone can sue anyone for any reason. You don't want to have a frivolous lawsuit in court, but it's always better for us to try to get it worked out before it turns into that. And as brokers, once it turns legal, we really have to step back a little bit because we're not attorneys, we're brokers. And so when someone starts to go at each other for the whole lawsuit thing, then I know it feels uncomfortable to step out because we all want to service our customers and clients. But I always tell the agents in our office, this is becoming a legal issue now. We're here if they need us for, evidence and documents and so on and so forth. But if they're going to hire attorneys, you've got to let the attorneys handle the situation.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't go that far. He fixed it himself. I just felt bad because I didn't know there was nothing I could do anymore after closing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to feel that way, that you can't do anything else, but you have to be very careful about crossing over those lines where you start saying things and doing things, and then guess what? Now you're going to be part of the lawsuit.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Because
Okay.
I can say, I'm sure Tom and Carlton can also say, we received those letters that will announce that not only are they suing the seller, but they're suing Deep Pockets, Keller Williams, and they name that agent as well. So they go for everyone, just to see where it ends up, because we were all party to that.
I see.
So be very careful with that. So let me throw another one out. This is a common one that happens as well. You're at the closing table, or it's a day before or a couple hours before, and for whatever reason, you as the agent want to give part of your commission to help out a situation at closing. What do? Can you do it?
If that's something you want to do, and if the lender's okay with it, because I think the lender is the one that has to give the permission, if I'm not mistaken, to
So who does the commission belong to?
the broker. Yeah, I said
The broker.
the
Brokerage, right. And if you're the buyer's agent and you want to do it, who's paying the commission?
The seller.
Seller is paying the commission.
Right. So I don't know if anybody's ever, this happens quite a bit, I think, in new construction, but it can happen in resale as well, where the seller says, well, you're welcome to give $5,000 away, but that $5,000 belongs to me. So if you don't want it, I'll just take it back. Now what? It happens. Everyone's going, wait a minute, but it's my commission. We all use lazy language, as I call it all the time, me included. My commission, my client, my customer. It's really the brokerage, and the commission belongs to the seller. So really the seller and the brokerage would have to agree for you to reduce that commission by $5,000. Now in our office, our policy, and we have 5 offices represented on this call. We're not going to get in the way of you doing what you want with your commission, but the seller has to agree to that as well. So we can't give kickbacks, correct?
Right, no.
So
Correct.
yeah, so that means there needs to be a reduction, and it really would say that the seller is giving that $5,000 to the buyer, and then that would fly with the lender. But you cannot hand your money directly to the buyer or directly to someone at closing. That's called a kickback. And that happens, It happens a lot at the closing table. Something came about, and in order for it to close, you've got to do it right there on the spot. We're not, in my office, we're not going to hold you up from that. But when it's coming from the seller has to agree, and that amendment has to be written correctly. Has anybody had that situation or ran into anything like that? I've had quite a few agents come to me that the seller said, nope, you don't want that money, then it's coming back to me.
I've never had that issue happen, but I will say that, and this happens a lot. I know you can also not ask that agent to give up part of their commission to make a situation work, because that's a code of ethics violation. So just be careful how you handle that. I've dealt with that this past week as well. You can always say, I'm willing to give $2,000 to help make this go away. And then you have to sort of let the other person come to the table. But you cannot, as a listing agent, you can't ask that buyer's agent to take a cut of the commission, because that's a code of ethics violation.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Hmm.
Barbara, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
I want to ask, and also in trying to come up with solutions at the closing table and using commission, if you haven't capped out, you still owe Keller Williams their percentage, correct?
Right.
That's an always yes. That's a hard yes.
So we don't
Right.
want to overpromise and underdeliver.
Right.
That's exactly right. And we're seeing a lot of that lately, people that haven't capped that are like giving away everything. And, you know, we want to encourage everyone to their obligations and commitments. We're all independent contractors, and we sign something saying that we will do this. So you want to do the right thing, as our Y4CTs talks about, that, you know, you take care of all of your commitments. You're running a business. So when you run your business, you're paying your debts and marketing and so on and so forth, and the leftover is your profit. So think that over before you start giving away dollars and cents, because sometimes that's done in haste. You know, when I teach contracts, I usually tell everyone, you know, cross your legs, look at your manicure, and not say anything, because, you know, unless I'm going to have a room in the house, I don't know that I want to be paying for a whole lot of things. But have we all done it? Absolutely. Absolutely. Me included, because, you know, you're talking sometimes so little money, and it's a transaction that it's going to take everybody coming together to get it done. And the first person they always look at is the realtor. So just make good decisions in your business before you do something like that. But I wanted to throw that out on the table, because it does happen, and I get those kind of calls. So I'm sure someone on this call today, either they've been there or it's coming. Let's put it like that. It will happen in your career at some point. So what else do we have? End of month crazy. What other things happen at the closing table that maybe you've done already and you're not sure, did I do that right? Could I've done it different? What kind of, this is an open mic session for you to kind of get your knowledge and have tools in your belt for the next scenario.
I've got one that I see from time to time. This is a scenario. You've got a buyer, okay, and let's say they're out of state and they're flying in to come to the closing, and something came up with work and they're supposed to close on a Friday, and they're like, well, we're just going to exercise our unilateral right to extend and close on Monday. And I think the key is here for agents is just to realize when you can exercise that unilateral right to extend. And there are really very few reasons that you can do that. If you're representing a buyer, it's really mainly if the lender, through the fault of a lender, the lender can't be ready on that Friday. So something like, it's inconvenient for the buyer. You don't have the right to extend that. And in today's market, it's a little bit scary because a lot of times we have backups on these homes that could be better. And so there may be motivation for the seller not to want to close with your buyer potentially. Same on the seller side, you can only really exercise it if there's an issue with the title, typically. So just kind of know that you can't just say, oh, buyer, guess what? We have this option here that we can exercise if we're not able to close. So don't worry about it. So just kind of be aware of that.
How is this with new construction? Is the unilateral, can the new construction contract take it out, or is that like a universal rate?
Yeah, they have their own contract. So you need to read what their contract has, unless it's on the GAR form. I doubt they have that same right. So be sure you read through the new construction contracts with whatever builder it is.
What I find in new construction is, Christine, also is they usually have some kind of per diem. So they're more than welcome to let you extend for 8 days, but to the tune of maybe $100 to $200 a day. So Carlton's right. Make sure that you read through their contract. A good practice would be, if your buyer is planning on writing new construction, ask that agent on site, could I get a copy of your contract before I know in this market, everything is moving so fast, but in a typical market, whatever that is, ask for that contract up front so you can read through it, find all the things that are not in favor of your buyer, and explain to them, we're about to enter into a contract, or you are about to enter into a contract, and here are the things that you're going to have to abide by. And it's been my experience that new construction, that they're not into striking anything, removing anything, that it is, you are going to do this or you're not getting this house. And it's probably even worse now. So the per diem is usually typically in there.
I'm seeing some crazy things in these new construction contracts too. So make sure you're reading them. I saw one the other day. It was like the seller has a right to terminate for any reason whatsoever. And, the buyers had $12,000 in customization money. And that little stip said they will, get to keep all the money, everything. It was just like, I cannot believe they're getting away with some of this stuff. And the key is, if they won't remove it, which most builders won't, they've, got these in for a reason to protect them. Just be sure that you're explaining it to your buyers and that they really understand what that risk is on the front end, not the back end. So any questions you have, definitely be reading through those contracts.
Yeah, and I would probably advise my client not to sign a contract where the seller can terminate for any reason at all, and I've got money tied up in that house. That's crazy.
Yep. I'm seeing some really crazy things, and you know why? Because they're getting away with it right now. So
that's the key. They're getting away with it. The last class I took with Seth, the courts are backed up with buyers just going at it, mostly with new construction. He doesn't really see that they may win, but they're doing it because they have $12,000, $20,000, $40,000 tied up into the situation, and the builders are just taking advantage. So it'll be interesting to see how our contracts change in 2022 because of it, from the lawsuits, because we all know our contracts typically change because times change or lawsuits have happened. So that's a good one. All right, let's throw in one more.
I have one more question. I do have one question. Where does that put us as agents? Because it's hard to find what the clients are looking for. So we are turning to new construction. So that put us in a precarious situation with our buyers.
Communication.
Well,
we all know that we read the contract, the buyer doesn't. So really sitting down with the buyer to say, here's what you're entering into. Are you willing to do that? And as Tom just said, I don't know that I would advise someone to do something where, halfway through the situation, the seller or builder could say, oh, we changed our mind, and so you lose your $12,000. I think it's really just consulting with that buyer before signing that contract and knowing that you've done that.
Okay, that's it. Okay.
I would also just add that that particular seller is adding that into the contract, because if somebody starts to get to be too much of a pain in his butt, he's going to terminate and move on because he doesn't want to deal with it.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Okay. Thanks.
All right, we're getting close to the end of the hour, so let me throw one more in. I don't know about Tom and Carlton, but this happens to me quite a bit. Hey, Deborah, can I be the power of attorney for my whoever at closing, buyer or seller? What's your thoughts on that?
No, at Keller Williams, you cannot.
And Barbara, let me pick on you. Why do you think we say no to being the power of attorney? What's the legal reason?
Well, one, I think it's more of a conflict of interest. And
Elaborate on the conflict of interest. What's the conflict of interest?
well, if I'm the power of attorney and things start to go awry, my name, like you stated a few minutes ago, my name is also going to be included on the lawsuit with Keller Williams. I'm not interested in making case law like that.
And what's your incentive?
For not being a power of attorney?
No, well, I might not be saying that correctly.
We're getting paid off of this.
There you
So
go.
at the end of the day, that's the conflict.
There you go.
We're
That's what I was
directly
looking for.
benefiting.
The
That's what I was
conflict
looking
is
for.
it's not an arm's length transaction.
That's what I was looking for, Tom. It's not an arm's length. If you think about it, guys, we have a vested interest in the transaction because we're going to be paid. So when you become the power of attorney, and you're correct, Barbara, you will be a case study because they are going to say, well, you signed agreeing to this. And if there's anything wrong down the line in that transaction and it comes back, I don't know, let's call it 2 years later, you're going to be named in that because you also were the power of attorney. And a judge will look at it that you had an incentive because you were going to get a commission. So you want this deal to close. So you're going to sign whatever in order to get your commission. Now, that might not have been your intent. You're trying to, service your client and customer and so on and so forth. But that's how the case studies and case law will look at it. And that's an example of something Seth talked about in a class a long time ago when he talked about power of attorney. We have a vested interest and it's not arm's length. So try to find out, what's the next best scenario if your buyer or seller doesn't have someone to do power of attorney.
One other thing with that too, it's my understanding our E&O insurance, we're not covered if we were to act as power of attorney for one of our clients. So that's
correct.
a big one too.
So what's the alternative?
If they don't have anyone who can come into the office and sign for them, they need to look at maybe doing a mail away.
That's the answer I'm looking for. That's the answer I'm looking for. And those are questions that you should talk to your buyer and seller about at the beginning. Now, we all know life happens. Something I think at the top of the hour, we talked about, Tom brought up, or somebody brought up, the person is flying in and work happens and we want to move it to Monday. I think it was Carlton. So what happens then? That person is kind of breaching the contract because they can't close on that day. But if you know that that's going to happen and everyone has a good conversation, we could do an amendment to move that closing to Monday. But if not, then we need to know in advance. And in some cases, the lender may not allow a mail away package. So they need to find, Willie on the corner to come in and sign for them, or that closing needs to be moved. So those are real life things that happen. Seem to always happen at the end of the month.
How about an attorney? Can an attorney be a power of attorney?
They can, but I don't find many that are closing because keep in mind, they have E&O insurance as well. And they also have to have an arm's length because remember, who do they represent at the closing?
Yeah, the buyer too. Or no,
The
the
lender.
lender.
The
The
lender.
lender.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, so we have to be very careful about that. So those are conversations you have. When I'm talking to someone, I ask, are you going to be at the closing? Oh, you know what? I'm not. And I tell them, then you need to start planning who's going to be your power of attorney. Can you do that, Deborah? No. and you explain that to them. That's a conversation to have up front so they can have enough time to look for a replacement or find a way to jump on a plane, come in and close and go back wherever they're going or whatever the case may be. It's hard conversations, guys, but at the end of the day, the common denominator is conversation. All right, one last thing and we'll wrap this up. This was a great conversation. I enjoyed this. End of month. We might need to keep this one on our agenda, guys. Anyone else?
I'd like to just say one last thing in conclusion. If you are having if you're on working for a buyer or working for the seller and you are dealt with a contract that has a closing attorney holding the earnest money, please make sure there are 2 forms that have to be signed, the F510 and the F511. I recently had an issue last week where I forgot which one is which. One is the agreement. I think that's the F510. And the attorney had not signed that document. There was an F511 in the file, and there was a dispute about the earnest money because there was a miscalculation on the due diligence days. Well, because that attorney had not signed that agreement, the F510, they dispersed the earnest money back to the buyer, and it should have gone to the seller, but they never agreed to hold it. So I had this discussion with agents here and in South Fulton all the time. Please remember, guys, the closing attorney or any attorney is not governed by the Georgia Real Estate Commission. Okay, so please be careful when you allow that to happen, because if you come to me and want me to try and settle it, I'm not the holder. There's not anything I can do about their decision. So, I mean, I can present the facts from our perspective, but that's all I can do. So just please be cognizant. I think we are taking contracts too quickly where a closing attorney is holding funds, and maybe you should say, well, if your broker won't hold it, let my broker hold it. That way we have some control over the disbursement if there's a dispute. So
That's been my experience as well, Tom. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for this week's broker chat. We'll see you next month. And if you have any suggestions on things you want us to discuss, please send them to your broker. We're always looking for new topics. And I appreciate all of you. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Carlton. And thank you for those that attended today. Have a great day and have a good end of month closing.
Thank you, you guys as well.